I mean, you are living the dream, actually, to have that kind of success with your first novel. Could you ever have expected it?
Never, because when I wrote this novel, I wrote it, without having had any kind of a background in English literature. I've not been within 50 miles of a creative writing workshop. Really wrote it strictly from the perspective of a reader, which I had been for, ever since I was a young kid.
You had a big advance for the book, which, again, most first-time authors could only dream of. And then, of course, it was a hugely successful film. I mean, you must have considered giving up the day job somewhere along the way.
My publishers still keep dropping these hints that you might give up the day job, look at the opportunity cost. But there's no way I'm giving up the day job, for two reasons. First and foremost, I take great pride in representing my country. It's a great time to be an Indian diplomat. And secondly, Michelle, I feel that it's the security of the day job which actually allows me to free up my creativity in my spare time.
But you can't have very much spare time if you're doing a full-time job as an Indian diplomat.
I'm a strictly weekend writer. A strictly weekend writer.
And you think that's good for the creative process?
Well, in the sense that, writing is still just a hobby, a passion, and I try to write whenever I get the time. I still call myself a diplomat who writes.
Okay, so I mean, give me an idea of your average weekend. You lock yourself away, presumably you have a family, right?
Yes, of course. I have a wife and two sons, and one son is studying in Canada, the other one is with us, and planning to come to UK for higher studies. But out of 10 weekends, I get barely 3 weekends free. Because, there's so much, I'm currently in Japan, and there's so much happening on the weekends in Japan. But I don't mind that because, as I said, for me, writing is not a compulsion. It is a diversion.
So you've managed to keep it all together. I wonder, though, overall, you've become one of India's best-known writers now, despite not doing it full-time. What do you think overall, though, of the climate for artistic freedom of expression in India? And I'm asking you particularly thinking about what Salman Rushdie has said recently about what he termed a cultural emergency in India, that there just wasn't enough tolerance for writers.
No, I think that is a very extreme term to use. There's no cultural emergency. I think the very fact that I, as an Indian diplomat, can produce the kind of novels that I write, which sometimes do explore the underbelly of modern India, it still tells you that there is full cultural and artistic expression.
Well, except, look at what happened to Salman Rushdie himself. So the premier Indian Literary Festival, the Jaipur Literary Festival, he ended up not going there because of all kinds of threats and protests. And this year, the same festival was under fire because some of the Pakistani writers almost didn't make it.
I think what I would say, Michelle, is that what's happening is that, a few fringe groups in India, they are sort of, running away with the agenda. And they are the ones who are creating problems and creating specifically law and order problems. And that's when, the government then has to weigh the advantages versus the disadvantages.
But the allegation is that often the government doesn't do enough, actually, to stand up for freedom of expression, that when there are incidents like this, it kind of lets the groups you're talking about dominate the agenda.
Well, I think that is also a point of view, but I think on the whole, the government is conscious of its responsibilities of protecting and preserving artistic freedom, and I think, that these incidents are also a sort of a wake-up call for, the more liberal elements in society to sort of guard their freedoms more zealously.
Well, if you acknowledge that there are these groups that are dominating the agenda in their way, then surely it's up to the government. And if it's a law and order situation, it's their job, right?
I agree, and I think the government is sensitive to the point that we should not allow any, any of the fringe groups to hijack the agenda, as it were.
And your new book, The Accidental Apprentice, it's also a story of contemporary India, isn't it? Tell me a bit about it.
It is really about, the India which is globalizing rapidly. It is about the India where tradition is brushing up against modernity. And really, it's about wish fulfillment, because it's about a 23-year-old sales girl called Sapna Sinha, who works in an electronics boutique in New Delhi. And one day, out of the blue, she's made an extraordinary offer by one of India's richest men.
Who's going to play her in the film? I'm assuming there's film interest already.
There's a lot of film interest.
Have you sold the rights?
No, not yet. But as I said, my agent is in discussion with people from both Hollywood and Bollywood. So let's see what happens. I'm in no particular hurry.